There is a plant that violates every principle of industrial agriculture. It produces food for 30 years from a single planting. It requires zero fertilizer, zero pesticides, and zero irrigation in most climates. It yields more protein per acre than soybeans. And in 37 states, growing it commercially became restricted, banned, or so heavily regulated that farmers gave up entirely. We did not outlaw it because it failed. We outlawed it because it succeeded too well. A crop that feeds itself, spreads without permission, and requires no annual purchase cannot generate profit for the system built to extract it. This is the story of the tree that fed civilizations, survived the Dust Bowl, and then vanished from American fields not by disease, but by design. Before we dig into what they buried, if recovering lost knowledge matters to you, the most powerful thing you can do is simple. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this with someone who needs to remember what we were made to forget. The archive opens in the American Southwest, 1,500 years before Columbus. The Hohokam people engineer an empire in the Sonoran Desert. They carve canals through stone, diverting rivers to fields of corn, beans, and squash. But their most important crop requires no canal, no river, no rain. It grows wild in every wash and arroyo, a tree with roots deeper than wells. The Spanish will call it mesquite. The Hohokam call it something closer to survival itself. Prosopis, the mesquite genus, contains 44 species spread across deserts on 4 continents. In North America, 3 dominate: honey mesquite, velvet mesquite, and screwbean mesquite. They thrive where almost nothing else survives: the Sonoran, the Chihuahuan, the Mojave. 120-degree heat, 10 inches of rain per year, soil so alkaline it burns most roots. Mesquite doesn't just survive, it dominates. The secret is underground. Mesquite sends a taproot straight down, 50 feet, 70 feet, some documented at 190 feet deep. That's deeper than a 15-story building is tall. It reaches fossil water, aquifers untouched for millennia. While surface plants wither and die, mesquite pulls from reserves laid down when glaciers melted. It doesn't need rain. It doesn't need irrigation. It just needs time. Above ground, the tree spreads wide, 30 feet across, providing shade that drops ground temperature by 20 degrees. Beneath that canopy, native grasses flourish. Animals shelter from the sun. The tree becomes an oasis. But the real treasure is the pod. Every summer, mesquite produces long, twisted seed pods. They hang in clusters, golden brown, sweet-smelling. Inside is a flour more nutritious than wheat. The Tohono O'odham people harvested mesquite pods every August. They dried them in the sun, then ground them in stone mortars. The flour was golden, fine, fragrant. It tasted like molasses, cinnamon, caramel. They mixed it with water to make a toli, a thick drink. They baked it into cakes. They stored it in sealed ollas, clay jars that kept it fresh for years. One mature mesquite tree produces 60 to 80 pounds of pods per year. An acre of mesquite produces 2,000 pounds. That's more protein per acre than soybeans, more carbohydrates per acre than corn in arid climates. And it requires zero inputs: no plowing, no planting, no fertilizer, no water beyond rainfall. Just harvest. The nutritional profile stunned researchers when they finally tested it in the 1970s. Mesquite flour is 13% protein. Wheat is 10%. It contains lysine, the amino acid most grains lack. It has calcium, magnesium, potassium, iron, and zinc. The carbohydrates are complex, bound with fiber. They digest slowly. Blood sugar stays stable. Diabetics wrote letters saying, "Mesquite flour, let them eat bread again without spiking glucose." The glycemic index of mesquite is 25. Wheat bread is 70. This was food designed for endurance, for desert people walking 20 miles a day in heat that killed outsiders. For the Seri, the Pima, the Apache, mesquite was the foundation. not a supplement, the foundation. Anthropologists estimate that mesquite provided up to 80% of calories for some southwestern tribes during summer months. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 1500s, they found entire economies built on mesquite. Villages stored tons of flour. Trade routes carried mesquite pods hundreds of miles. The Spaniards tasted it and wrote that it rivaled the finest breads of Europe. But they also wrote something else. The natives who depend on mesquite cannot be controlled. They do not need Spanish grain. They do not need to trade for food. They are self-sufficient. That sufficiency was a problem. By 1800, American settlers pushed into Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. They brought cattle, millions of cattle, and cattle loved mesquite pods. Ranchers celebrated it first, free food for livestock. The cattle fattened on pods, gaining weight faster than on grass alone. Mesquite-fed beef tasted richer, ranchers said, marbled with fat that melted on the tongue. But cattle did something the natives never did. They ate pods and spread seeds in their manure across millions of acres. Mesquite began to explode beyond its historic range. More cattle meant more seed spread. More mesquite meant ranchers faced a choice: adapt or fight. They chose fight. By 1900, mesquite covered 50 million acres across Texas alone. Ranchers wanted grassland, pure grass for cattle. Mesquite was competition. It used water. It took space. It could not be easily removed. So they declared war. The first weapon was fire. Ranchers burned millions of acres. Mesquite resprouted from the roots. Fire made it worse. Each burned tree sent up dozens of new shoots. One tree became 10. The second weapon was axes and chains. Crews cut trees, dragged them with tractors, piled them, and burned the wreckage. Mesquite resprouted. Any root fragment left in the soil sent up new growth. Clearing an acre cost hundreds of dollars. Within 5 years, the mesquite returned. The third weapon was poison. By 1940, chemical companies offered herbicides designed to kill woody plants. 2,4-D, picloram, tordon. Ranchers sprayed from planes, from trucks, from backpacks, millions of gallons soaked into the earth. Mesquite died. So did everything else. The soil turned toxic. Grasses didn't return. Erosion began. And within a decade, mesquite resprouted anyway. The war cost billions. It failed. Mesquite adapted faster than ranchers could kill it. By 1960, Texas A&M University published studies showing mesquite control was economically unsustainable. You could not win. But admitting defeat meant admitting mesquite had value. And value meant changing the system. The system refused. Instead, laws changed. Starting in the 1970s, state legislatures across the Southwest passed noxious weed laws. These laws designated certain plants as harmful, invasive, or undesirable. Mesquite made the list in state after state: Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, California, Oklahoma, Kansas. 37 states eventually classified mesquite as a noxious weed or restricted its cultivation. The laws varied. Some banned planting mesquite. Some required landowners to control or eradicate it. Some allowed fines for anyone who let mesquite spread. The result was the same. Growing mesquite intentionally, harvesting it commercially, or promoting it as a crop became legally dangerous. Farmers who wanted to cultivate mesquite for flour faced regulatory nightmares. Grants evaporated. University research shifted to eradication, not cultivation. The message was clear. Mesquite was the enemy. But laws don't change biology. Mesquite kept growing. It covered more land in 2000 than in 1900. Every herbicide, every bulldozer, every fire just scattered the seeds further. The war against mesquite became the most expensive agricultural failure in American history. And almost nobody asked why we were fighting in the first place. The answer is control. Mesquite represents everything industrial agriculture cannot tolerate. It is perennial. You plant it once, or you don't plant it at all. It just grows. Perennials do not require annual seed purchases. No seed purchases mean no profit for seed companies. Mesquite requires zero fertilizer. It is a nitrogen-fixing legume. Its roots host bacteria that pull nitrogen from the air and convert it into soil nutrients. It fertilizes itself and everything around it. Ranchers who hated mesquite admitted that grass under mesquite was greener, thicker, more nutritious. The tree was feeding the competition. Zero fertilizer means no profit for chemical companies. Mesquite requires zero irrigation in its native range. It survives on rainfall that kills wheat and corn. In West Texas, mesquite thrives on 8 inches of rain per year. Corn needs 25. Zero irrigation means no profit for water districts, no control over who grows what based on water allocation. Mesquite cannot be patented. It is a wild native species. No corporation can claim ownership. Farmers can harvest, replant, or simply let it grow without paying royalties. No patents mean no monopolies, and mesquite produces food whether you manage it or not. Abandoned fields in Texas fill with mesquite within a decade. The trees fruit without permission. Anyone can harvest. That open access terrifies systems built on scarcity and extraction. A crop that grows without inputs, spreads without permission, and feeds without cost cannot generate perpetual profit. And what cannot generate profit must be eliminated or controlled. The noxious weed laws were not about protecting agriculture. They were about protecting the business model. The same pattern repeats across history. Crops that enable independence are systematically erased. Amaranth was banned by Spanish conquistadors. It was sacred to the Aztecs, and it grew without wheat's demands. The Spanish burned fields and executed anyone caught growing it. Amaranth survived in remote villages, hidden for centuries. Hemp was outlawed across America despite being the most versatile fiber crop ever domesticated. It required no pesticides, enriched soil, and produced paper, rope, cloth, and oil. But it competed with cotton and timber and could be grown by anyone. The Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 destroyed the hemp industry. Perennial wheat was developed in the Soviet Union in the 1930s. It yielded grain for years without replanting. Stalin's agricultural authorities suppressed it. Perennials do not fit centralized control. The pattern is clear. Sovereignty crops, plants that let communities feed themselves without external inputs, are targeted. Not for failure, for success. Mesquite survived because it is unkillable, but knowledge of its use nearly died. By 1980, fewer than a dozen elders among southwestern tribes still knew how to process mesquite flower traditionally. The recipes, the harvest techniques, the storage methods were disappearing. Anthropologists scrambled to record what was left. Then something shifted. In 1984, a botanist named Gary Paul Nabhan co-founded Native Seeds Search. The mission was simple: preserve desert-adapted crops and the knowledge to grow them. Mesquite was priority one. Nabhan worked with Tohono O'odham elders. They taught him to harvest pods in late summer when they turned golden. Dry them in the sun for a week. Grind them in a stone mortar or a hand mill. Sift out the seeds and hard fragments. What remains is flour, sweet and fragrant. He tasted it and understood. This was not survival food. This was delicious. Bakeries in Tucson began experimenting. Mesquite pancakes, mesquite cookies, mesquite bread. The flavor was unlike anything in modern cuisine: complex, layered caramel and smoke and earth. Chefs discovered it. High-end restaurants in Phoenix and Albuquerque added mesquite flour to menus, not as novelty, as luxury. Mesquite-crusted salmon, mesquite shortbread, mesquite ice cream. The flour sold for $20 a pound, more than imported almond flour. By 2000, small companies across the Southwest started milling mesquite commercially. They wildcrafted pods from public lands or bought from ranchers who were happy to have someone harvest what they were spraying to kill. The industry stayed small. Noxious weed laws made expansion nearly impossible. In Texas, a farmer who wanted to plant mesquite orchards faced legal threats. Counties could sue, neighbors could report. Even though mesquite was native, even though it grew wild everywhere, cultivating it intentionally remained legally gray. Most gave up, but some didn't. In Arizona, a collective called Desert Harvesters began teaching urban residents to harvest mesquite from city parks. Phoenix had thousands of mesquite trees planted as ornamentals. Every summer, the pods fell and rotted. Desert Harvesters organized harvest events. Families collected hundreds of pounds. They milled it into flour, baked bread, and shared it. The city threatened to shut them down. Harvesting from public land without permits violated ordinances. Desert Harvesters fought. They argued mesquite was native. The pods were going to waste, and food security mattered. After 2 years, Phoenix relented. Limited permits were issued. The fight revealed the absurdity. A native tree, growing wild, producing nutritious food and harvesting it, was illegal. Meanwhile, science caught up. University studies in the 2000s confirmed what indigenous people knew. Mesquite pods contain 16% protein by dry weight, higher than quinoa. The protein is complete, containing all essential amino acids. The fiber is soluble, feeding beneficial gut bacteria. The minerals are bioavailable, and the carbohydrates have a glycemic index lower than almost any grain. Research in Argentina, where mesquite also grows, showed that mesquite flour improved outcomes for diabetics. Blood sugar remained stable. Insulin sensitivity increased. The flour also promoted satiety. People ate less and felt full longer. Animal studies showed mesquite feeding livestock reduced the need for supplemental grain. Cattle fed mesquite pods gained weight as fast as cattle fed corn, but with better fat marbling and higher omega-3 content. Ecological studies revealed mesquite's role in reversing desertification. The deep roots broke up hardpan, allowing water infiltration. The canopy reduced evaporation. The nitrogen fixing increased soil fertility. In degraded rangelands, allowing mesquite to grow restored grass production within a decade. Every study pointed to the same conclusion. Mesquite was not a pest, it was a solution. But solutions that don't generate profit are ignored. By 2010, climate change made mesquite impossible to dismiss. The Southwest was drying. Aquifers were collapsing. Rivers ran dry. Crops that depended on irrigation were failing. Alfalfa, cotton, and corn were becoming unsustainable. Mesquite thrived. It didn't notice the drought. Its roots reached water that wells couldn't touch. It fruited in heat that killed fruit trees. It represented the future, whether anyone liked it or not. Permaculture designers began incorporating mesquite into food forests. Plant a mesquite tree, and it shades, fertilizes, and feeds everything around it. Beneath its canopy, you can grow vegetables that would wither in open sun. The tree produces pods for human food and animal feed. The wood, when pruned, makes the finest barbecue charcoal in the world. Nothing is wasted, but scaling mesquite production hit the same wall. Laws written 50 years ago to eradicate mesquite remained on the books. Farmers wanting to plant mesquite orchards faced county agriculture boards that threatened fines. Grants for mesquite research were denied. Universities prioritized herbicide studies over harvest efficiency. The system built to destroy mesquite could not reverse itself. Too many careers depended on control. Too many chemical companies profited from herbicides. Too many water districts justified budgets by managing irrigation. Mesquite, which needed none of that, was a threat to the entire apparatus. So it stays marginalized. Small mills process a few tons per year. Wildcrafters harvest from public lands. Chefs use it as a specialty item. But mesquite will never appear in supermarkets at scale. Not because it can't, because it threatens the supply chain. Industrial food requires dependency. Farmers must buy seed annually. They must purchase fertilizer, pesticides, and irrigation. They must harvest with machinery built for monocultures. They must sell to distributors who control pricing. Every step extracts profit. Mesquite breaks every step. It reseeds itself. It fertilizes itself. It irrigates itself from deep aquifers. It grows in polycultures mixed with grasses and shrubs. Harvest is manual or requires specialized equipment, and anyone with land can grow it without permission. That independence is unacceptable. So mesquite is called invasive, labeled a weed, and regulated into obscurity. The same word, invasive, used for any species that succeeds without human control, as if success without permission is a crime. But mesquite teaches a lesson empires hate. Abundance does not require control. Perennials persist. They do not need annual planting, chemical dependency, or corporate supply chains. They adapt, survive, and outlast every system built to replace them. The Dust Bowl proved it. In 1935, the Great Plains turned to desert. Topsoil blew away in black clouds that darkened skies from Texas to New York. Wheat fields died, corn withered, cattle starved, millions fled, but mesquite survived. In West Texas, in New Mexico, mesquite trees stood green while everything else turned brown. Their deep roots reached water the drought couldn't touch. Families who had ridiculed mesquite as cattle food began harvesting pods to survive. They ground flour, baked bread, and fed children when wheat was gone. After the rains returned, after tractors replowed the plains, mesquite was forgotten again. The lesson was ignored. We returned to annuals, to crops that fail when rain stops, to systems that require everything nature provides for free. Now the lesson is coming back. The Colorado River is drying. The Ogallala Aquifer is nearly gone. Droughts last longer. Heat breaks records. The crops feeding America were bred for a climate that no longer exists. Mesquite was bred for chaos. It survived ice ages and mega droughts. It fed people when empires collapsed. It grows where nothing else can. And it waits. 37 states still regulate it. But mesquite doesn't care. It spreads regardless. Every cow that eats a pod plants 100 seeds. Every flood carries seeds downstream. Every wildfire clears competition. Mesquite advances. In 2023, Texas A&M published a study reversing decades of policy. The title, Mesquite as a Climate-Resilient Crop for Arid Regions. The conclusion, mesquite should be cultivated, not eradicated. The data showed mesquite produces more food, more fodder, and more ecological benefits than any annual crop in arid lands. The study was ignored by state agriculture boards. Laws were not changed. Funding was not allocated. Because changing course requires admitting 50 years of eradication was wrong. It requires admitting that indigenous knowledge was correct. It requires dismantling the profitable war against a tree that only wanted to feed people. But the knowledge is not lost. It lives in the elders still grinding flour. It lives in the small mills processing pods. It lives in every desert harvester's event, every permaculture food forest, every baker experimenting with mesquite pancakes. And it lives in the tree itself. Mesquite does not need us to remember. It just grows. It fruits whether we harvest or not. It spreads whether we allow it or not. It persists. The question is not whether mesquite will survive. It will. The question is whether we will be smart enough to use it before the systems we built instead collapse completely. Climate change is not coming. It is here. Water is running out. Soil is eroding. The industrial model is failing. Mesquite offers an alternative. It is not the only answer. but it is an answer we have spent a century trying to destroy. That destruction is the story. A native tree, older than agriculture itself, producing more food per acre than soybeans, requiring zero inputs, and we made it illegal, not because it failed, because it succeeded without asking permission. Every mesquite tree standing today is an act of defiance. It grows despite the herbicides, the bulldozers, the laws. It feeds wildlife, enriches soil, and drops pods full of flower every summer. It teaches the same lesson over and over. Abundance is not scarce. Sovereignty is not impossible. Perennials return. And control is a lie we tell ourselves while the desert blooms without us. There is one more layer they never talk about. Mesquite is not just food, it is infrastructure. Its roots stitch soil together in places where wind would otherwise strip the land bare. Each tree is a living levee, slowing flash floods, forcing water to sink instead of tearing across hard ground. Where mesquite grows, aquifers recharge, springs reappear. The tree does not just survive drought, it actively rebuilds the conditions that end drought. Old ranch records from South Texas noted something strange. Wells near dense mesquite stands stayed productive longer during dry years. Fields cleared of mesquite saw water tables drop faster. The tree was accused of stealing water, but the data suggested the opposite. By breaking up compacted soil and shading the surface, mesquite reduced evaporation and increased infiltration. It did not drain the land, it healed it. And then there is carbon. Mesquite locks massive amounts of carbon underground in its deep roots, not for decades, for centuries. While annual crops release carbon every time fields are tilled, mesquite stores it, season after season, building a bank of stability below ground. In a warming world, that alone should make it priceless. A tree that feeds people, rebuilds soil, recharges water, and locks away carbon is not a weed. It is a blueprint. It is what resilience looks like, which is why it was labeled a problem. Because resilience makes extraction obsolete. If this opened something, subscribe and hit the bell. Every share protects what they tried to erase. The next vault opens soon.